Okay, are we live?
I think so.
For real? All right, we're going to call this meeting to order for a second time at 1:35. I'd like to welcome everyone to April meeting.
And
of
to
the
test 1,
City
2,
of San
3.
Diego Historical
Test
Society
1,
Board.
2, 3.
And I will turn it over to Suzanne Seeger for some introductory remarks.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Suzanne Seeger, a senior planner in the Heritage Preservation section of the City Planning Department. Today's Historical Resources Board meeting is being conducted pursuant to the provisions of California Government Code Section 54953E, as amended by Assembly Bill 2249, which allows the city to use teleconferencing and to provide the public an opportunity to address the board via a call-in option or an internet-based service option. Effective February 10th, 2023, the Historical Resources Board will be meeting in person, and meetings will be open for in-person testimony. In lieu of in-person attendance, members of the public may submit their comments online via the Development Services webpage, via telephone, Zoom, or US Mail, and the method documented on the posted agenda. Today, we are using Zoom as our hybrid meeting platform. In addition, this meeting is being live streamed via the City of San Diego's Public Hearings YouTube channel. Please note the buttons on your Zoom meeting bar that pop up when you move the mouse. Share screen will enable an applicant to give a presentation, and the microphone is to mute and unmute. Please remember to stay muted when you are not talking and to unmute yourself when you speak. When wanting to participate in discussion, please virtually raise your hand and Chair Hutter will call on you in the order entered. Please refrain from using the meeting chat in order to comply with the Brown Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. We will start with a quick roll call to confirm board member attendance for the record. When I call your name, please say present. Vice Chair Byers.
Present.
Second, Vice Chair Taylor.
Present.
Board member Cortez.
Present.
Board member Foyle.
Here.
Board member Farley.
Present.
Board member Winter.
Here.
Board member Woods.
Present.
Thank you, everyone. We do not have any board members who have indicated they need to arrive late or leave early today, but we do need to wrap up our meeting by 3:30 due to meeting room constraints. Next, we move on to non-agenda public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board on issues within the jurisdiction of the HRB not previously heard or on the agenda. Members of the public attending in person must submit a speaker slip to the hearing secretary, and those attending remotely should indicate their desire to speak by raising their virtual hand on Zoom. Speakers will be provided 3 minutes each to address the board. We did receive one speaker slip for non-agenda public comment. That was from Lori Saldana. Ms. Saldana.
Not sure where the microphone is. Is it just embedded like it is?
In 1 second, we'll find the mic.
It's a part of the testing.
Yeah. You're doing good.
You could kind of just use my mic.
I know, it's like,
Well, I know, but she could just walk over there. She's used to. I'm in front of people. I am flexible. I can. Yeah.
can't be like.
All right, thank you. And I used to teach IT, so I can relate to the technical. I just want to note that I appreciate the work that this board does in preserving the historic built nature of our communities. I sometimes am concerned about the loss of cultural heritage. And I know, Ms. Coyle, you've worked on that, and many city boards and commissions actually start with the land acknowledgement of the culture that preceded even the settlement that has occurred in a relatively short, historically speaking, period of time. I just want to encourage that when it comes to looking at our housing situation. We have communities that have been literally wiped off the map and ignored and forgotten. And I think it does a disservice to those of us going forward when we don't acknowledge that we've made very poor decisions in the past regarding communities. And I'm speaking as former assembly chair of housing and community development. When I would meet in communities where they were struggling with older homes, and at one meeting in particular in Linda Vista, I think we had 6 or 7 languages represented in the meeting. So these are communities that are very diverse. And I would just encourage this board to consider the cultural heritage as well as the built heritage when looking at the history of San Diego. and what that sometimes means when you're interpreting what is and isn't of historic significance. Thank you.
Thank you. I did not see any other speakers that submitted. Let's see here, do we have anyone raising their hand online for purposes of online?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on next to administrative items, board administrative matters and general information.
Prior to today's hearing, the board members have been emailed the HRB criteria guidelines, the motion and findings form for historical designation, staff memos for items 2 and 3, updated draft resolution for item 3, correspondence from Save Our Heritage Organization, Historic Kensington, Mission Hills Heritage, and Jacqueline Fulton for item 2, and correspondence from Scott Motion on items 2 and 4.
Thank you. Let's go to general board member comment. Do any board members wish to provide comment on items not on today's agenda? Seeing and hearing none, we will move on then. Move to declaration of conflict of interest, ex parte communications, and failure to visit sites. First on conflicts of interest, do we have any conflict of interest disclosures from board members? I have one. I have a financial conflict on item number 3. The applicant is a client of my law firm, so I will be recusing on that item. Ms. Quinn?
Yeah, I don't have a conflict, but I have a question on that item number 3. We received a secondary memo yesterday that added a number of exclusions to it. While I've been to the sports arena building, I did not have time to go and look at each of those other structures that were provided to us yesterday. So I don't know if this is the time to ask a question on that, or if that doesn't matter. It's just about the sports arena building, but I just wanted to raise that at an appropriate time. Thank you.
The item before you today is the sports arena. It's a very large parcel, so there are a number of buildings on the parcel. And those buildings are being excluded from the designation.
Yes, I was able to read that, but my question is, if the excluding of those then means that they're not historic, and the board members weren't able to look at those buildings, is this the only time then that they would come before us? That's more my question.
The sports arena is coming before the board in conjunction with a permit, that will be proposing demolition of the sports arena structure. The project will not be, the project is evaluating all of the things that are associated with the project. The buildings that were added in the memo that was distributed yesterday will not be impacted by the project and will be evaluated through the over 45 review at a later date should a project be submitted which impacts the exterior of those buildings.
Okay, do we have any other conflict of interest, ex parte communications, or failure to visit designation sites, invitations, or whatever?
I'm not invoking the waiver, but on the Beloit project, I didn't get there on the dates that were the site visit dates. I went and visited a different time.
That's on item number 4.
Yep.
I have had the same issue. I was not able to get there on the designated times when there was extra availability to get access. To my knowledge and recollection, although I will defer to the city attorney, I don't think that is an invocation of waiver. Someone is able to visit from the right of way.
So we can try to review it for,
I would prefer to stop on whether that would require a waiver.
So to clarify, you were able to view the property from outside the fence.
Correct.
So do you feel like there was sufficient documentation from your site visit that you would not? You were able to see everything.
Yeah, the documentation and, yes.
Same.
So I just want to clarify, based on the board procedures, site visits to nominated sites is beneficial in the designation process as they increase the knowledge and understanding of the resource and its physical setting. Only historical resources board members who have conducted a site visit for a property under consideration may vote on the designation unless a site-specific waiver is approved by the board. And if a motion to waive the site requirement needs to state one of the following factors that are listed in the board procedures.
I just want to echo Chair Hutter and Board Member Winter's comment that I was not able to go to the interior of the project on those dates either, but I was able to visit at another time.
That would be better if it was 4.
But that should not affect my decision today, based upon the other information provided and my visit to the outside.
So just for further clarification, the board procedures state that the procedures requiring board members to view resources prior to voting on the item does not apply to designation of interior spaces if photos with a key floor plan are provided for review of building interiors.
It's not an interior, it's the exterior of the property. Mr. Lynn, do you feel, this is Mr. Lynn's item. Do you feel like it was important for the board members to see the courtyard and to the point that they would need to invoke the waiver to waive the site visit?
I believe the photographs sufficiently document the current condition of the building. So if the board members have to report, which they do, they should be able to have enough information.
I recommend out of an abundance of caution that we invoke the site waiver, because it's seeing the interior, the courtyard area, and being able to walk around the whole building due to the limited site access. That is what staff recommends.
So there are 4 of us that are requesting such a waiver.
Well, does that have to be done now? Well, that has, because the item may be continued, is that correct? That's what I was going to ask, is that if we're continuing, we don't, okay. Well, I was going to ask if there would be another opportunity to see the courtyard. If the item is continued.
We have received a formal written request from the applicant to continue the item. Why don't we consider that right now, and that will allow us to move forward. So on the request for continuance, item number 4, Mr. Mugis, you want to be heard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Yes, I did request a continuance for 30 days until the May meeting. On behalf of my clients, Daniel and Carrie Asen. I'm joined in this item with IS Architecture, and I think based upon all the information that's been submitted, there are some rather complex and some rather kind of nuanced issues that we would like the board to be aware of relative to original integrity and the historical significance of the property. The staff report is quite detailed. The HRRR is quite detailed as well. Staff had contacted us to make specific provisions to the board members to see the site. Unfortunately, as I hear today, that there are a couple board members, several actually, that were unable to go at those times. So we will certainly, if the item is continued, we will certainly make the property available with other times that are convenient for the board members. We happen to believe it's our position that seeing the entire site from both public and private vantages in terms of the exterior, including the rear, past the breezeway area, is very, very important to an understanding of the historical significance of the resource. It will actually be very, very helpful for the board to conduct that visit and understand the facades in question, which will also be part of our presentation. So I think that the site visit flows very, very nicely into the presentation, which we intend to present to the board next month. So on behalf of my clients, I would respectfully ask for that 30-day continuance. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public that want to be heard on the request for continuance? Okay, close public comment on that. Board member comment?
I'm prepared to make a motion, just wanting to be sure that 30 days is enough time. Yes, I'd like to then make a motion to continue item 4 until the May board meeting.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? All right, we'll take the vote. Board member Cortez,
Yes.
board member Woods,
Yes.
second vice chair Taylor,
Yes.
vice chair Byers,
Yes.
I vote yes. Member Farley,
Yes.
board member Boyle,
Yes.
board member Winter. Yes. All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, and Mr. Moon, we appreciate you and your client making the property available, and hopefully you can communicate with staff to find additional dates. And I will say on my behalf, I'll put every effort to be there, understanding the importance of that to the applicant. Okay. I think that resolves our declaration of conflict of interest, ex parte communications of third visit sites, as well as our request for continuances or withdrawals. So we are then on to request for items to be placed on the consent agenda. Staff has proposed 2 items for inclusion on the consent agenda portion of the agenda. Actions to designate a resource as historic require an affirmative vote of 6 board members, and all other actions require an affirmative vote of a majority of board members present. Any board member may add or remove an item from the consent portion of the agenda. Any removed items will be heard in accordance with our regular placement on the agenda unless otherwise indicated. The following items are proposed by staff for the consent portion of the agenda. Item number 3, the San Diego International Sports Arena, and item number 5, the John and Elizabeth Suchi / Charles Sawyer's house. So we will, we have received a couple of speaker slips on these items. So we will start with those speakers, and if anyone else would like to be heard on the consent agenda, please do submit a speaker slip, or if you are online, please raise your hand. We'll start on item, I'll note for the record, by the way, in terms of written comment on items that are proposed for the consent agenda. We have written comment from Novid Safapur in opposition to recommendation on item 3. His comments will be noted for the record. And then we also have on item 5, written comment received from Ricardo Flores in opposition to the item. His comments will also be noted. Neither one of those individuals sought to speak during public testimony. In addition to those written comments, we have received a request to speak on item number 3. We have 3 speaker slips in favor from Greg Shannon, Emily Steele, and Shannon Davis. That's as part of an organized presentation. And then in opposition, we have Lori Saldana. So we would invite Ms. Saldana to come forward now. And that's a good point. Okay. Ms. Sebastian has reminded me that I will be recusing on the consideration of item 3, and I apologize for moving us forward into that item. I'm going to suggest that we take item 5, and then I will step out of the room, and Vice Chair Byers will handle item number 3. Sorry for getting ahead of myself. On item number 5, do we have any speakers who wish to be heard on the issue of whether that would be on consent? Or do we have any online?
We do have one person online with their hand raised, Alan Hazard.
Yeah, if this is item 3, it's
No, on
the
item
sports
5,
arena.
Mr. Hazard, we're going to come back to item 3. Right now we're dealing with item 5.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We also have a indication in a speaker slip from Jennifer Stropes on item 5, indicating she's available to speak and answer questions, but do we have any other speakers who wish to be heard on item 5? Seeing and hearing none, I'm going to suggest that we take a vote for item 5 to proceed on consent. Do I have, first I will close public comment and move to board member comment. Any board member comment on item 5? What?
Are we moving it on consent? Are we approving it then, right?
It's
Yeah,
it's
I
on
will move
consent.
this on consent for approval. I just want to know if there is a Mills Act in the future that consideration be given to the front security door and side security grates over the windows.
Any, do we have a second to board member Coyle's motion?
I will second it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Board member comment? Okay, we'll take the vote on item number 5. Start down at this end. Board member Winter,
Yes.
board member Coyle,
Aye.
board member Farley.
Aye.
I vote yes. Board, Vice Chair Byers,
Yes.
second Vice Chair Taylor,
Yes.
board member Woods,
Yes.
board member Cortez.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries unanimously. Ms. Rose, you want to be heard on behalf of item 5 or your client?
She says, thank you.
And I will be right back. Vice Chair Byers.
Okay, at this time, we are going to evaluate item number 3, the San Diego International Sports Arena's placement on the consent agenda. And we will go to public comment. We have in person received 4 public comments, 3 in favor, 1 in opposition. 1 second.
I believe all the speakers that's in favor, they were just to speak, should the item be pulled for consent.
Got it. Okay, then Lori Saldana, would you like to come forward to speak about this item being on the consent agenda?
So there will be no presentation.
If it stays on consent agenda, there would be no presentation.
Okay, thank you. Well, I mentioned in my non-agenda comment that the value of land acknowledgement for people who come before what this board might be considering. And I think that's the case when it comes to the residents of Frontier housing development. It's described briefly in here as World War II era housing, but the fact is those families lived there for another 20 years until the city proposed pushing them out and building this arena after other attempts to build a theme park and other things failed. And there are several local histories that have been written, one from 30 years ago, one more recently, that really document that this was a housing development that was built out of necessity by the federal government when the city refused to build housing at the time for workers in defense contract facilities nearby. It was related to the Linda Vista housing, which remains, but that coastal area, just as now we're fighting over what will go into coastal areas, that battle remains. So I'm concerned that the only historical designation being mentioned is truncated. It's not addressing the families that live there and were forced out, first by threats of rents increasing, does this sound familiar? And then by eviction because of public property or public domain. So that's why I opposed this on the item. I am also opposed because frankly, I think that area is going to be underwater very soon. In fact, I taught in that area for nearly 10 years at the community college location. We had infiltration of sewage because it's at sea level. We had streets collapsing around the campus. I think this project overall is in the wrong place at the wrong time when sea level change is already impacting underground infrastructure, disrupting water and other underground pipes, and causing cancellation of events at the sports arena. So why build and put people in harm's way? So that's why I oppose this, both on the lack of full consideration of the true history of this area and in the city's history of housing discrimination, quite frankly, and also because I don't think that Midway Rising, I refer to it as Midway sinking. I just don't think it's the right project in the right place. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Now we'll open it up to any public comments from anyone online. Is there anyone online who would like to speak on item 3 and its placement on the consent agenda?
We have Mr. Bruce Coons and then Alan Hazard.
Well, I'm just getting a little used to the format. Thank you, Chairman, Byers, members of the board and staff. I'm in favor of it staying on the consent agenda, and I guess I'll withhold comments from there in case it comes off the agenda, but in which case I do want to make comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hazard?
Thank you. And I agree, let it stay on consent agenda. I just wanted to get in a couple of thoughts that I thought was missing from the report. For a time in the late 60s to the early 80s, the sports arena saw the greatest track and field athletes in the world compete. Carl Lewis, Jim Ryan, Steve Williams, Lee Evans, Mary Decker, Willie Davenport, Arnie Robinson, Soviet Olympic champion from '72, Valery Borisov, John Carlos, Marty LaCory, Dick Fosbury, Frank Shorter, Dwight Stone, Jerry Lindgren, Steve Prefontaine, and many more. Quoting a UT sports writer, but for me, nothing tops the night of Eamon Coughlin's mile on the sports arena boards during the Jack in the Box games. It was electrifying. He blew the roof off the joint. If you're new to this area or too young to remember, track and field was a huge deal here. But for whatever reason, the 11 laps to the mile boards of sports arena were the fastest in the world. So the meet promoter, Al Franklin, had no problems enticing the best distance runners in the world to compete. Eamon Coughlin, John Walker, Philbert Baye, Henry Rono, Dick Crack, Steve Scott, and again, but nothing compared to Eamon's world record in 1979 when he blew away the indoor world record with the 352.6 mark. He bettered it 2 years later, running 350.6 for the mile indoors, and Steve Scott ran an American record of 351.8. Track and field has been forgotten. There's no mention of track and field in the sports arena record that I could find. An additional question, if they demolish it, what happens to those track boards? So I just wanted to get in a little bit of a shout out that the sports arena was the place in America for track and field for many, many years. It was the biggest indoor meet in the world. Largely forgotten, but I just wanted to add that point. I think it should be designated. Thank you.
Thank you for that education. We appreciate it. And I do just want to note that I believe Chair Hutter mentioned this, but I just want to make sure we capture it for the record that we had a comment submitted by Novid Safapour in opposition to this item. And that comment will be included in this record. All right, do we have any board member comments about this item staying on consent or being removed from consent? Because that is what we're discussing at this time. We have no board member comments. So at this point, we would be looking for a motion to designate the property via consent. Do I have a motion?
And
Board member Davis.
I'll make a motion to designate the sports arena site as identified in the staff's report, the criterion A, B, and C as identified by staff.
Thank you. Do you have a second?
And I'll second motion.
Thank you, board member Taylor. Do we have any further discussion on this item?
Dr. Woods, go first.
Dr. Woods.
This board designation, I think there's a small error that might, need to be addressed. It's, on page 16 of the consultant's report, where there's a discussion of new formalism. And they identify 2 outstanding students of Walter Gropius, IMK, and then it says Walter Rudolph. And I believe they want Paul Rudolph there.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. Yes.
And my comment is, I really appreciated what, our commenters had to say about maybe some additional significance to this building. And if in fact, this gets designated today, which it looks like it will, and if it wants to be demolished at some point, this would probably need to come back before the board for a site development permit and findings. And I would encourage the folks who offer testimony today to come forward and bring that information again, for any mitigation that might come before us relative to that sad demolition. Thank you.
All right, are there any other comments from the board? Yes, Ms. Sebastian.
Thank you. I would just like to remind the board that the decision to whether to designate a property is based on the criteria specified in and consistent with procedures of the historical guidelines of the land development manual, the information and research report, testimony, and other documentary evidence presented in today's meeting. The designation must be supported with substantial evidence in the record, and a future project is not relevant to the action that is going to be.
Thank you. Any other comment from the board members? All right, with that, let's go ahead and take the vote. Board member Winter,
Yes.
board member Coyle.
Aye.
Board member Farley. Yes. I am a yes. Board member Taylor,
Yes.
board member Woods, board member Cortez.
Yes.
Thank you all. Does anyone from the team want to speak?
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
We'll be back.
Okay, we'll see you soon. I believe somebody is going to get distributed. Okay. All right, we will continue once we have our chair back.
We will now move on to the approval of the agenda, we wrapped up the consent agenda. We have remaining for consideration today, items 1, 2, and 6. It has been suggested by staff that we take item 1 after we hear item 6. Both of those are board business as opposed to public facing business, although we appreciate that everyone cares about the organization of our board. So I would propose that in order to address the public matters, especially given that we have a matter with pressing time commitments, that we would take the matters out of order, that we would hear item 2 first, then we would hear item 6, and then we would hear item 1. So that's my proposal to the board of how we would hear the rest of the agenda. Any comments, questions, concerns about that? Right.
Are you looking for a motion, Chair Hunter?
I'm not sure we need one, but I will move to consider the items in the order stated as 2, 6, 1.
I would second. Yeah.
Thank you. Sure. Deputy City Attorney Sebastian reminds me that we should open up the opportunity to speak on the agenda to comment. If anyone from the public would like to be heard on the proposed reordering of the agenda, please come forward now, raise your hand. Seeing no one jumping out of their seats. Do we have anyone online who is raising their hand to speak? Okay, we'll give it 2 more seconds and then we will move on to vote. All right, calling the vote, we'll start with you, Board Member Winter.
Yes.
Board Member Coyle,
Aye.
Board Member Farley,
Yes.
I vote yes. Vice Chair Byers,
Yes.
second Vice Chair Taylor,
Yes.
Board Member Woods,
Yes.
Board Member Cortez.
Yes.
Thank you. So then we will move on and start with item number, actually, we will not yet. We will move on to consider the approval of the minutes for March 28th. Forgot that we reordered already. We'll have a little bit of board business. Any members of the public wishing to speak on items of the relating to the approval of the minutes may do so. If you would like to speak, please do come forward or raise your hand online. Public comment on the March 28th, 2024 HRB minutes. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. What about board member comment? Board member Coyle?
I just wanted to move the minutes.
Thank you. Motion from board member Coyle,
Second.
second from board member Farley. Further comments, questions? All right, take the vote. Board member Cortez,
Yes.
board member Woods,
Yes.
second Vice Chair Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Byers.
Yes.
I vote yes. Board member Farley.
Yes.
Board member Coyle,
Yes.
board member Winter.
Yes.
Thank you. Now let's move on to city staff report. We will start with city planning department. Kelly.
Thank you very much. The City Planning Department is working with the Development Services Department to bring forward fee adjustments. This includes the department's fees related to hourly project review, as well as the 4 heritage preservation fees. The heritage preservation fees, which include the historic resource designation nomination fee, the Mills Act application fee, the Mills Act monitoring fee, and the Mills Act enforcement fee, were first established in 2008 as fees intended to recover city costs associated with providing the service to the customer. The historic designation nomination fee has not been updated since 2008, and the 3 Mills Act fees were last updated in 2015. None of the fees are currently cost recoverable. Staff looked at the job classifications and time involved in providing each service, as well as staff costs and overhead rates. As a result of this analysis, the fees will be increasing as follows, or proposed to be increased as follows. The historic resource designation nomination fee, which has not been adjusted since it was established 16 years ago, will increase from $1,185 to $3,366. The Mills Act application fee, which was last updated 9 years ago, will increase from $471 to $1,305. The Mills Act monitoring fee, which is charged every 5 years and was last updated 9 years ago, will increase from $234 to $870. And the Mills Act enforcement fee, which has not yet been charged to any property and was last updated 9 years ago, will increase from $756 to $1,935. The fee waiver for low-income households is not changing and will remain available. Lastly, the fee adjustments will also include a new fee to appeal actions by the Historical Resources Board to designate a resource to the City Council. The appeal fee will not be fully cost recoverable, but will be established at $1,000, consistent with the fees to appeal a discretionary project approval or an environmental determination. Property owners seeking to appeal designation of their own property will be exempt from the new appeal fee. The fee adjustments were reviewed by the Land Use and Housing Committee earlier this month and will be reviewed by the City Council in mid-May. And it is anticipated that the fees will become effective in July, if approved as proposed. And this concludes the director's report.
Thank you. Moving on next to our subcommittee reports. Suzanne?
Thank you. A meeting of the policy subcommittee was held on April 8th, at which the board members discussed the nominations for the annual preservation awards. The discussion will continue at the May 13th policy subcommittee meeting, which will be held at 3 p.m. in the large conference room on the 5th floor of the city administration building. For more information regarding the Archaeological and Tribal Cultural Resources Subcommittee, please visit the City Planning Department website. And the next meeting of the Design Assistance Subcommittee was scheduled to be held on Wednesday, May 1st at 4 p.m. and that has been canceled. Stay tuned for June's meeting.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our subcommittee report out and leads us now to our agenda items. So now we will move on to discussion item number 2. So this is the Arnold and Schultz and Sponge Florence Heights Historic District National Register nomination. We have permission house heritage. Let's begin.
Thank you, Chair Hutter. Good afternoon. I am Bernie Turgeon, Senior Planner in the Heritage Preservation section. With me today is Kelsey Kaline, Associate Planner. This is item 2, the Arnold and Schultz Edition, North Florence Heights Historic District National Register nomination. The applicant, Architectural Resources Group, on behalf of Mission Hills Heritage, prepared and submitted a National Register nomination for a historic district called the Arnold and Schultz Edition North Florence Heights Historic District to the State Office of Historic Preservation. As a certified local government, the city is tasked with reviewing the nomination and providing a recommendation on the proposed listing. The nomination was received from the State Office of Historic Preservation on March 5th, 2024. The nomination concludes that the proposed district is eligible for listing on National Register of Historic Places at a local level of significance under National Register Criterion A in the areas of community planning and development and Criteria C, architecture, with a period of significance of 1907 to 1950. Staff has reviewed the nomination and strongly agrees with this conclusion. We are therefore recommending that the board recommend to the State Office of Historic Preservation listing on the National Register. We are also asking the board to consider recommending the nomination be amended to expand the district boundary to include 24 additional properties, change the contributing, non-contributing classification of 6 properties, as well as add a caveat with National Register district nominations of this size that proposed classifications of the remaining resources may not be adequately confirmed by staff due to the limited property-specific information and documentation requirements for National Register nominations. A recommendation by the Historical Resources Board to the OHP is not a designation action, and the proposed historic district will not be listed in the City of San Diego Register of Historic Places. However, if listed or determined eligible for listing on the National Register by the State Historic Resources Commission and the keeper, the district would meet the definition of a designated historical resource under the city's municipal code and would be subject to compliance with the city's historical resources regulations. This slide shows an overview of the district. The district nomination surveyed a total of 352 parcels and identified 266 buildings as district contributors and 85 buildings and 1 site as non-contributors. 40 properties are also designated as local historical resources individually. The district nomination has been reviewed and evaluated by the State Office of Historic Preservation and is proposed for listing by the State Historic Resources Commission at their meeting May 3rd, 2024, under National Register Criteria A and C. The National Register criteria are similar, but slightly different than our local criteria. All criteria are not required to be discussed during the National Register listing process, and once listed, districts can be amended by going through a similar review and voting process with the State Office of Historic Preservation. Staff has evaluated the nomination and concurs that the nomination can be supported for listing under National Register Criterion A in the area of community development. Specifically, the district has a direct associations with patterns of streetcar suburbanization in San Diego, represents the expansion of San Diego's streetcar network to Mission Hills, and showcases how streetcars directly dictated patterns of development. We were also able to review all individual resources within the proposed district through fieldwork, review of Sanborn maps, historic aerial images, and Google Street View. Staff concurs that the proposed district contains a concentration of buildings and structures that are united historically and aesthetically by their physical development and have historical interest representative of several development periods and architectural styles within the city. The significance criteria arguments and themes under both A and C also align with the 2016 Uptown Survey's narrative. This slide shows the proposed boundary. The irregular boundaries on the north and east are mainly due to the canyon topography. Okay, the cursor. So the cursor is pointing to the western boundary, which follows Stevens Street. The north boundary follows the contour of the canyon to Barr Avenue. The eastern boundary follows another canyon contour to the vicinity of Eagle Street. And southern boundaries jog along West Lewis, Fort Stockton, and West Washington Place. The proposed district was identified as a potential historic district during the city's 2016 Uptown Community Plan Update. The update included a historic context statement and reconnaissance survey, which identified 22 potential historic districts within this community. The survey was substantially more detailed than a typical reconnaissance level survey because it incorporated previous surveys and conducted more extensive fieldwork. Importantly, the survey followed National Register standards in determining district boundaries. Factors considered included historic boundaries using the original subdivision maps together with a survey assessment of visual barriers, visual changes in character, and clearly differentiated patterns of development. The National Register nomination excludes several areas that were included in the Uptown survey, such as canyon open space and a grouping of properties south of Washington Street, shown here. As discussed in the also excluded are the properties at 4162 through 4190 Ingalls Street. They are in this block. They were built outside the period of significance, as well as 4136 and 4145 Falcon and 821 West Montecito. Over on this block, Staff notes the block faces in each of these areas are less visually linked with blocks in the district, and 2 of the 4 properties on the Eagle Street block currently would not appear as contributors. Staff therefore concurs with these changes from the Uptown survey. This is the map from the Uptown survey of the North Florence Heights potential historic district. The survey identified a separate potential district within this historic subdivision. Staff agrees with combining the 2 original subdivisions into 1 district. Further, the nomination adds a property pointing to here, constructed in 1922 at the north end of the boundary. This will be the discussion of the boundary. We have additional images and maps and graphics that were not available at the time of the report. We reviewed the National Register Bulletin, quote, defining boundaries for National Register properties, and spoke to the OHP reviewer. The bulletin provides guidance on how to identify and evaluate resources for their historic significance. The bulletin includes parameters for drawing historic district boundaries that are relevant to this discussion, such as the excerpt on this slide. Quote, do not select boundaries which exclude a small non-contributing island surrounded by 2 contributing resources, simply to identify non-contributing resources and include them within the boundaries of the district. City staff sees the boundary issue. Accordingly, we recommend not carving out individual properties on blocks, especially with buildings that were constructed during the period of significance and could potentially be restored. Within a district, integrity of feeling, setting, and association are especially important for maintaining visual continuity. As such, we are recommending 24 properties proposed for addition to the district. 22 of these properties were also identified as district resources within the Uptown survey. 2 properties, 4309 Plamosa and 4255 Randolph Street, were identified by staff during this review process. This map shows the locations of staff's proposed additions to the district. I'm pointing to the property at 4309 Plamosa. This is 4255 Randolph, the 1600 block of Fort Stockton Drive, Lark Street, and West Washington Place. 4277 Jackdaw, and in this area, 10 properties along the edge of the canyon. The following 8 slides contain more detailed information on each of these areas. The locations of 4309 Plamosa and District Resource 4253 Palmetto can be tied to Lot 2 in the northern portion of the original North Florence Heights subdivision. That's outlined in this area. The 1600 block of Fort Stockton Drive contains a grouping of 6 potential resources that were excluded from the nomination, but are part of the historic subdivision and were included in the boundary of the potential district identified in the Uptown survey. 4 of these properties shown here are potential contributors. The 2 properties shown here would be non-contributors, but are part of the 6 property grouping shown on the previous slide, and they are located between the other significant resources within the proposed district. This slide shows 4255 Randolph and 4277 Jackdaw. There's similarities between these 2 properties. They were both built and then later altered within the period of significance. They showcase evolving architectural styles. The Uptown survey identified the Randolph property as individually eligible and the Jackdaw property as a potential contributor. This slide and the following 3 slides show the properties in proximity to canyon open space. These properties surrounding the canyons are all built within the period of significance and relate as much to the built environment as to their canyon setting and should be included in the district boundary. This slide shows a cluster of properties on Hawk Street and 2 on Ibis. This slide shows 2 the terminus of West Montecito. This shows 2 properties on West Arbor Drive. They're possible contributors that are obscured from the public right of way. This slide looks at the 5 proposed additions on Lark Street and Washington Place. All 5 properties were included in the boundary of the Uptown Survey's potential district. However, 4004 and 4010 Lark Street were modified after the 2016 survey. The 3 properties on the east side of Lark Street maintain continuity with the district. And 2 of those appear capable of being restored to historic significance as contributors. Please note, we received public comment today from the owner of 4021 Lark Street, objecting to the classification of this home as a contributing resource. Staff agrees with methodology to classify contributors described in the nomination. After review of all 352 parcels, we are recommending reclassifying 6. This will not change the ratio of contributors to non-contributors, as does not change staff recommendation on the district as a whole. This slide summarizes staff's typical method of classifying district contributors, which is discussed in the report, so I won't spend a lot of time here. Please note, alterations that render a property non-contributing are generally those that are more substantive, not easily reversible, and significantly change its design intent and appearance from the public right of way. This slide shows images of the 6 properties proposed for reclassification. We also have additional slides with more detail on each property. We have also received 2 requests to reclassify properties since the agenda was posted. One for 4128 Ibis Street and another for 4236 Ibis, which we are prepared to discuss at the request of the board. In conclusion, we agree that the district retains significance under national criteria A and C, and acknowledge the work of Mission Hills Heritage and their consultant in bringing forward this nomination as it advances historic preservation within the city. This concludes the staff report. Thank you.
Organized presentations. We'll start with speakers in favor. Yes. So if you have plenty of speakers, so are you? I'm going to read their names. Obviously, Barry Hager and Andrew Goodrich. Alan Holtz. Sharon Lieber. Lauren Carter.
Yes, and Mr. Goodrich is going to begin.
Before we start this, since we're anticipating a lot of comment on this item, members of the public who wish to provide virtual testimony must enter the virtual queue by raising their hand before the queue closes. The queue will close when the last virtual speaker finishes speaking or 5 minutes after in-person testimony ends, whichever happens first. Those participating virtually may not cede time to other participating.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay? I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you all. It's a little muffled on my end, but I just wanted to make sure you can hear me.
See that.
What is the name? Andrew?
Yeah. Hi, I'm sorry. Can you all hear me okay?
Oh, well, go ahead. Go ahead.
Andrew, can you try speaking again?
Yeah.
We hear
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Apologies. It was cutting in and out, but I think it sounds good now. So we've prepared a brief presentation. I can either share my screen or I believe staff also has it. So whatever your preference would be.
You can share it, please.
Sure.
Okay, we have our presentation up.
Okay. So presentation should be up. Can you all see my screen? Presentation?
You want to go into presentation mode so we can,
Full screen.
it'll expand a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
There we go. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Goodrich. I'm with Architectural Resources Group. Our firm prepared this nomination on behalf of Mission Hills Heritage. And I'll be providing you with a brief summary of the nomination and its key components. And then I'll make myself available to answer any questions that you might have for us, in addition to the folks at Mission Hills Heritage. So just a little bit of background, and Bernie explained this in detail, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. But in 2016, the city's Uptown Survey identified 2 potential historic districts in the eastern section of Mission Hills. The first being Arnold and Choate's Addition, the second being North Florence Heights. Our team took a careful look at this data. We decided to combine these 2 potential areas into a single National Register district nomination for a few reasons. These 2 areas are next to one another, they're contiguous. They developed at the same time. They're associated with the same historic context and themes, and they exhibit nearly identical development patterns and architectural characteristics on the ground. So what resulted from all of this was a single National Register nomination. The district that we have nominated is called the Arnold and Choate's Addition North Florence Heights Historic District. It's a lot of words, but it combines all of the names of the previous 2 districts identified by the city survey. The district is being nominated under 2 National Register criteria, Criterion A and Criterion C, with a period of significance of 1907 to 1950. So the district boundaries are similar to those identified in the city's Uptown Survey, but as staff's presentation noted, there are a couple of differences. So I just wanted to touch on that real quickly. We made a few modifications to the city's recommended boundaries in the Uptown Survey to bring the boundaries in line with what is required for National Register purposes. Specifically, we applied the guidance provided in National Register Bulletin number 15, which recommends omitting peripheral areas that no longer retain integrity and or deviate from the character of the district. We also omitted a discontiguous section of the Arnold and Choate's Addition subdivision. This is south of Washington Street, and it's separated from the rest of the district by the Washington Commercial Corridor. Discontiguous districts are generally not recommended by the National Register, so we did decide to exclude that, as staff noted. This map shows what the recommended district boundary looks like. The north and east boundaries are largely shaped by topography, by canyons and other natural features. The west boundary abuts the adjacent Fort Stockton Line district, which is located just beyond Stevens Street. And the south boundary excludes blocks that have been compromised by alterations in contemporary infill. I wanted to touch briefly too about our methodology for assigning statuses of contributors versus non-contributors. Contributors were constructed during the period of significance of 1907 to 1950, and they also retain the essential aspects of integrity. Non-contributors were either constructed outside the period of significance, or they had been significantly altered to the extent that they no longer convey their historic character. So these are just a few photos to give a representative sample of kind of what this looks like in practice. So contributors are pictured on the left side of the screen. They have high to moderate integrity. I think for district purposes, the resource is the district as a whole and not any one individual property within it. So there does tend to be a little bit more flexibility when it comes to alterations than there might be for an individually eligible property. Non-contributors are pictured on the right side of the screen. So on the top right, this is a property that was constructed within the period of significance, but has been extensively altered. And then at the bottom of the screen, this is the bottom right corner of the screen. This is a property that was built after the period of significance, does not relate to the historic context and themes. So in theory, the process of distinguishing between contributors and non-contributors sounds pretty clear cut, but of course, in practice, as we all know, it ends up being much more nuanced and can depend on a variety of factors. So we did meet with city staff. We had several conversations about where we landed on contributor status and where they landed. We were very pleased that overall we all concurred about the vast majority of these properties. There were a handful of properties that Bernie discussed in his staff report presentation about potential changes to 6 properties. These are listed on the screen. Staff provided our team with additional information that justified their position. So our team carefully reviewed this additional information, and we do concur with staff's recommendation to change the status of these 6 properties that are listed on the left side of the screen. In addition, we received additional information from the owner and their counsel for the property at 4128 Ibis Street. Based on this additional information, our team also concurs with the owner's request to change the status of that property from a contributor to a non-contributor. So this doesn't really change the numbers much. I think it changes it by like 1 from what's listed in the nomination. But at the end of the day, once these changes are made, 267 of the 352 properties within the district, which is 76%, are contributors, which makes for a strong district with a strong sense of place. So on behalf of our team, I wanted to thank you all for your time and attention. I know this is a lot of information to digest. We really appreciate your attention to this and for your feedback. And again, I'm available to answer any questions that you have. And the applicant, Mission Hills Heritage, is also here to answer questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Mr. Hager.
In addition to outstanding architecture, this neighborhood is also an excellent representation of an early
streetcar suburb that catered to middle-class households with mostly modest incomes on smaller compact lots and small-scale commercial properties that serve the growing area. This nomination is the culmination of a community-led effort that involved extensive outreach and engagement with property owners, residents, and stakeholders. We began this effort 2 years ago by forming a committee of Mission Hills Heritage volunteers who gathered preliminary historical information about the 2 contiguous subdivisions that constitute the proposed district. After engaging Architectural Resources Group, we compiled a list of owners and addresses within the district. Using the address of record for property taxes, we mailed a letter to each property owner in March 2023, which informed them of the effort to create the district and asked them of for any historical information about their homes or the area in general. We also launched a publicity campaign apprising the local community of our efforts to nominate the district and providing information about the process by way of an article published in the Presidio Sentinel, a neighborhood newspaper, in April 2023. We also hosted some multiple small group meetings with interested neighbors. Throughout the process, we worked closely with Architectural Resources Group to refine the nomination, including providing input on architectural descriptions of homes and buildings, helping refine the list of properties and the list of proposed contributors and non-contributors, and making suggested adjustments to the nomination and the lists as needed. Now it is our pleasure to present this National Register nomination to the State Historic Resources Commission and to you for review and recommendation. We also understand that community preservation groups like ours are carrying the torch of historic preservation for the city of San Diego, while the city's own historic district program is on extended pause. We urge you to recommend to the state that this nomination to the National Register be approved with the change in status of 6 properties within the proposed boundaries of the district as noted by Mr. Goodrich, but without staff's suggestion to amend the nomination to expand the boundaries. The district can always be expanded later, and we've included in a letter that we prepared to the board the procedures for making that change. So that can always be done in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Susan Dean. Let's just leave it on for the next speaker. That way we don't have to, yeah. Thank you.
My name is Susan Dean.
Can you speak into the microphone closer?
There's that.
Put it close.
My name is Susan Dean, and I am a member of a committee, a volunteer with Mission Hills Heritage who works on this project. I'm here for an odd reason, and it's kind of a bummer. Alan Fleischman had submitted a public comment about this property at 4236 Ibis Street, and it's for the record, and I wanted to respond for the record as well. But unfortunately, Alan and his wife had to leave for a medical appointment a moment ago, so I spoke with him, and I want to speak with you about it. Mr. Fleischman was concerned about his property being classified as a contributing resource, and he stated that he only learned about the effort to nominate the district through an article in the local paper. And I assured Mr. Fleischman, as I assure you, we diligently compiled records of the property owners, address of record, and sent letters to them in March of last year. And I take Mr. Fleischman at his word that for whatever reason they didn't receive it, that his address as of last year was in Northridge, California. And it continued when we updated it and submitted this to the state. And it still is as of yesterday. So he acknowledged that, but for whatever reason, he didn't receive it. And Barry Haber has already outlined the other outreach efforts. So we did make reasonable diligent efforts to communicate details. The information that Mr. Fleischman put forth doesn't lead us to change our
discussion of his property being a contributor. It still appears to us to be a contributor. And, we can comment on that if you'd like later. And frankly, the nature of the project that he described, I don't see how being a contributor would be any way a problem for that. That's it.
Thank you. We have Laura Hanson.
Good afternoon, Chair Hunter and HRP members. My name is Laura Henson and I am president of the Talmadge Historical Society, and we are officially a historic district. The Keeper just approved us. I had the privilege of walking the Arnold and Soch edition, North Florence Heights Historic District yesterday. I'm going to refer to it as ACFH just because it's easier. And I strongly support it being listed on the National Register of Historic Places. I find this district not only beautiful, but both locally significant and important. I would like to share why I've come to these conclusions. The proposed historic district is exceptional in that it has 75% contributors. In addition to the high level of integrity, this proposed historic district reflects a complete early streetcar subdivision full of single-family homes, both big and small, modest and grand, apartment buildings, a nursery, a school, a church, and a park. This is a complete community in every way. The proposed historic district includes 2 subdivisions that blend seamlessly together due to not only being contiguous, but their similar historic architectural development and style. According to city staff, they aesthetically complement one another. ACFH period of significance is from 1907 to 1950, which demonstrates that many historic communities are organic and change and grow over time. In this case, over a period of 43 years. This is something to celebrate, especially when that neighborhood has maintained architectural integrity within all historic time periods. The district also has some local early visionaries that not only share their design talents with the district, but made a lasting impact on San Diego's architectural heritage. I am referencing William Templeton Johnson, who designed the San Diego Museum of Art in Balboa Park and co-designed the iconic Art Deco Community Administration Building located at the San Diego Harbor. Richard Requa built within ACFH. He too is known for contributing to the design team at the County Administration Building. He also designed several significant buildings within Balboa Park. They are the Aerospace Museum and the Federal Building, which reflects an Aztec structure. And lastly, Kate Sessions, the horticulturist for Balboa Park. She both lived, grew, and sold plants within the district. Please recommend Arnold and Schultz addition North Florence Heights Historic District to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It is a wonderful district. It should be preserved for this generation and future generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you. And last in favor, we have Scott Mugin. And Scott, you indicated that you're an organized presentation featuring Scott Mugin. Do you need more than 3 minutes?
3 minutes is more than sufficient. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Scott Mugin. I'm representing David and Sarah Potter, who own property at 4128 Ibis Street, which is identified in the nomination as number 108. And essentially, we are asking the board, and by virtue through the board to OHP, to change the recommended classification of the Ibis Street property from a non-contributor to a contributor. And to this end, I'd like the board to be aware of the following. In 2016, the city of San Diego undertook the Uptown Historic Survey, and they identified a number of potential historic districts within that context. And one of them was essentially this survey, the Arnold and Schultz Historic District. At the time, the survey identified my client's property on Ibis Street as a minimally altered craftsman bungalow that was built in, I believe it was 1925, and recommended that this was indeed a contributor to the district. Since that time, we have the current nomination And we were surprised to see that that recommendation was carried through and that it was classified as a non-contributor. So we asked ourselves why, what has changed in the interim? So we looked at the nomination and we noted that there were several properties that had been identified as contributors and they had been modified. And they included some window alterations, they included some railings, some porch enclosures. And the only thing that we could really discern was that at my client's property along the northeast elevation, there's some wood cladding. So we assumed that it was determined to be a non-contributor on the basis that it had this wood cladding. So we retained the services of Mr. Paul Bergio of Bergio Stucco, who's worked on a number of historic properties. And he peeled back the wood cladding and lo and behold, there was original stucco underneath and it was in fairly good condition. So my clients do intend to remove that stucco at some future, or rather the wood cladding at some future date, intend to restore the stucco in a historically appropriate manner. We share this information with OHP. We have my letter to OHP. And we submitted this to the city. We also, by way of the city, submitted it to the applicant. Mr. William Berg at OHP, who is the reviewer for SHPO, wrote to me and said that, quote, the writer of the nomination concurs with the additional information provided and the nomination will be revised to reject the change from a non-contributor to a contributor. And city staff has said that the information we provided about reclassification can be supported. So what we have here is a situation where the property owner is in favor of the establishment of the district and the change of the classification. We have the applicant, Mission Hills Heritage, and their consultant also in favor of the change of the classification. We have a city staff, which is in favor of the change in classification, and we have OHP. So quite simply, with all due respect, we would ask the board to please change the classification from non-contributor to contributor and respect the historical significance of this resource. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving now to in-person speakers in opposition. We do have a speaker slip from Alan Fleischman. I understand, unfortunately, that Mr. Fleischman had to leave the meeting, but we know his opposition. He also submitted a written comment, which is captured as part of our records. Then we have Sharon Gale and then Laura Solda. Ms. Gale.
I'm speaking opposition. The world is changing. We have, particularly because of climate change. The city wants to fight climate change by allowing more housing close to jobs and stores, so that people don't have to drive so hard. That involves changing neighborhoods, changing regulations. This would not allow that. I have a couple of questions. I understand that the staff did not notify the property owners about this meeting, even though you knew what was going on. And I'd like to know why, and I'd like to know why the churches were not told, the two churches in this project were not told that they could exempt themselves from local designation. This affects churches are in the process are being affected by the changes in the world, social changes. They need to be able to adapt to changes. They need to be able to adapt their own buildings to changes. These regulations would say that treating the buildings as a museum has higher priority than the needs of the congregation. It would add to expenses. And I'd like something else I have not heard anyone talk about. I'd like the staff to tell us. We all know that historic regulations makes it more expensive and more complicated when you want to get a building permit. The Mills Act makes it even more complicated. Here is another third level of regulations. I assume what is involved. What effect will these new regulations have on properties, on property owners? What additional paperwork will this add and expenses? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gill. I saw that.
I realize there's only one binary choice. You can oppose or you can support, and I wish you would offer oppose unless amended. In other words, there are some aspects of this I think are worthwhile. I am concerned that San Diego is facing incredible deficits. The budget cuts are not going to be pretty. And many of the programs that are going to be cut affect communities that are very different than the community that you're making this designation on. And my understanding is that this results in a lower property tax basis. Am I misunderstanding, or is that the case with these designations? That people end up over time paying less in property taxes. And while a small percentage of that, relatively small, goes into city government, it is still something where we see people who live in homes that are, frankly, quite nice, expensive. Probably the people who live there are of higher income levels, and yet they are contributing less to the tax base and to city government. And that concerns me, and it has concerned me since I was chair of housing. And I looked at the Mills Act, and I knew Senator Mills. But what also concerns me is the Airbnbs that are in the community. I did a quick search on a website called niceneighbors.org. If you're familiar with that, it's very helpful to look up and see what houses are in this proposed designated area, because there are what I consider, frankly, commercial business operations taking place. I don't think that these are contributing, if that term is correct. They're not contributors, but they're next door. These are people who are, again, living in properties that are, I don't know if the entire area will have a difference in tax basis, but it concerns me in every neighborhood in San Diego where people are taking what should be full-time residential buildings and converting them into short-term vacation rentals. And then they don't contribute their fair share, whether it's to a maintenance improvement district or a business improvement district. But I just wanted to encourage you to take a look at those properties. They are often right next door to some of these historic designated properties. And I think that is something to take into account. Are they having some tax basis shift as a result of this? I'm not familiar with the details of how this works, but it seems if you're operating a business, if you're not living in a property, but you're now going to get some benefit from this new designation, that again, it's not really fair. It cuts into our tax base, and it makes it more difficult for the city and other local agencies to balance their budgets, which in part come from some of the property taxes that come from these properties. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of our submitted speaker slips in person. I will note for the record that we have significant participation in writing written comment before the meeting. So many that we are going to identify or recognize those comments and acknowledge that they are submitted in part of our record, but we will not be reading their names and identifying each and every of those individuals. We're going to move online now, where it looks like we have 5 speakers. Alan Hazard, Wesley Morgan, Bruce Coombs, Janet O'Day, and a phone number 619-384. That's your prefix. If you know that, if it's you, please be ready. Okay, so we will start at the bottom with Alan Hazard, please.
The bottom, but number one in your hearts. Thank you. I'm a resident of Mission Hills and was a historian, researcher, and proponent of the Mission Hills Historic District. I support the nomination of the proposed Arnold and Choice addition, North Florence Heights Historic District, to the State Office of Historic Preservation. Mission Hills is a rare example of an intact historic neighborhood comprised of excellent examples of period architecture, designed by most of San Diego's significant architects and builders, including William Templeton Johnson, Richard Requa, Frank Mead, Emmerbrook Weaver, and builders such as Schreiber, Melhorn, Rigdon, Irvin, and John S. Graves, who built my house, and many lesser known, nearly forgotten builders who nevertheless built vernacular homes, which are a testament to their craftsmanship materials that are irreplaceable today. The submitted report found a significant percentage, 76%, of the proposed properties to be contributors. That is an impressive number, further emphasizing the critical need to designate before more homes are recklessly demolished without full consideration of each contributor's connection to the neighborhood as a whole. The designation report and findings support your acceptance of this district today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Wesley.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great presentation today. I just have one clarifying question for the board as you discuss, and that's what is the board's authority to make recommendations to the state and national register? Just looking through the procedures, looking through the policy, the best I could find is 123.0206, that the nominations could be recommended to the city council from the Historic Resource Board. And just wanted to know where going through that path fits into recommendations going forward for state and national register. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board and staff. Bruce Coons, Executive Director of Save Our Heritage Organization. We just wanted to register our wholehearted support for the district. Also, we wanted to support the inclusion of the IBIS property that Scott talked about. Instead of repeating what everybody else said, I think this is an eminently eligible district with a great cross section of architectural types and a very dense historic district that is easily recognizable. Did want to state for Lori's information, hi Lori, that nobody gets a tax break from today's action or the action up at the state level. Eventually, if it becomes a local district, individuals can apply individually for tax reduction, and certainly non-contributors wouldn't be eligible, or commercial non-contributors either. And once again, these property taxes are based on fair rental value, so there still is tax. It goes up every year as long as rentals are going up. And their surrounding properties go up in value to more than compensate for any potential loss to the city. However, I agree with you that low-income areas should even have more concentration of historic districts and the benefits that actually make homes more affordable, like the Mills Act, which is our only such benefit, and should be actively promoted, which they were supposed to have been doing since 2016 when this was updated before. Thank you very much, and please move this district forward. The city should have done this as much as 30 years ago in this district.
Thank you, Mr. Coons.
Can I just note for the record that the virtual queue is now closed?
All right, Janet O'Day.
Thank you, Chair Heyer, board members and staff. As a longtime historic preservation consultant known for the Mission Hills Historic District, as well as many individual local landmarkings, I'm also a nearby bystander to the proposed district and an enthusiastic advocate for the preservation of neighborhood context that historic districts provide. I urge the board recommendation that the board recommend listing the Arnold and Choi Edition North Florence Heights to the National Register. The proposed district is a treasure trove of our early history, and its preservation is vital. As an aside, I sent a brief informational photographic study of the charming district street trees, as old growth trees are an important part of our historic neighborhoods. And I, along with many of my neighbors, are thankful for those who brought this district forward. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. And last, we'll move on to our phone number participant. Please identify yourself for the record and go ahead.
Hello, my name is Ricardo Flores. I'm a homeowner in Kensington. Just very concerned about this item. I'm 47 years old. Hopefully I'll be a resident of San Diego for the next 40 years. And I'm concerned because every time we vote to do historic resources for districts or homes, we continue to eat at our tax base. And I want the city to be prosperous. I want the city to have good programs. I want the city to have good infrastructure. But this group of individuals here on this board, I would hope that you all and that staff would prepare for you all how much money certain properties are not going to have to pay when they are deemed historical, the same way that you would look at this historic district of 300 odd properties. If in fact they can deem themselves historical and not pay property taxes, how much are we foregoing as a city? I think that's very relevant. I think it's beautiful to have historic communities. Kensington's a beautiful historic community. I'm in a 1950s home. But at the same time, it's also important that we have a tax base and that we all have shared responsibilities. And what's happening here is we're taking our most precious and important communities with the highest resources, the highest property taxes, and we're allowing them not to pay property taxes. And for many of you who are pushing this item, God bless you, but I've got 40 more years on this planet, I hope, and I don't want this tax base to be destroyed because we're going to preserve somebody's home. So please, city staff, consider providing updates with your decision-making on how much property taxes are going to be foregone if, in fact, districts like this are created, if, in fact, individuals like my neighbors in Kensington here are going to ask later in the agenda for a tax break because their home is historical. How much money are we losing for these things? Because the city should not be supplementing this, especially a city that is in such dire financial straits as the city of San Diego. So again, please be smart, please be resourceful, and please add that piece of information so that we all know what exactly you're doing. Because I know this board, you guys work hard at what you're doing, but I don't think you guys care about the tax base. I don't think you guys are concerned about the long-term fiscal stability of this city. I think you guys are a little bit out of control in the work that you're doing with respect to designating historical properties that have just been around forever. Thank you.
Okay, that closes. We will close public comment now and move on to board member comments. Have questions, comments? Mr. Cortez, go ahead.
I have a question for staff regarding 4128 Ibis Street. Sounds like the applicant is requesting, or the representative of the property owner is requesting that this property be a contributor. Would that solely be a recommendation that the board can make? Or would we be recommending that you amend your report? What would that process look like, and what's the actual request for the board to take action? The board can make a motion to add it as one of the properties that could be reclassified. It sounds like there's concurrence with the State Office of Historic Preservation already to reclassify that property, but if this is some direction that the board would like to add, then I think that's available. Thank you. My follow-up question is regarding the expanding the boundaries of the historic district. The preparers or the group proposing the district, they've stated that they do not want to move forward with the expansion that the city's made the recommendation to. Can you provide a little bit more in detail of the full blocks of why this recommendation's been made? And then after that, it would be great to hear from the applicant is it a timing issue of that? Why that would it be considered at this point in time? To hear from both. We are prepared to provide discuss additional detail kind of on a block by block level.
if you are interested in a specific block, we could kind of pull up the slide and discuss it. In general, our recommendation to expand the boundary is based on several factors. The main factor is the boundaries with the 2016 Uptown Survey, which is noted in the staff presentation, was based on National Register criteria for evaluating boundaries. And so we looked at that as kind of a major input. We did do field work and looked at kind of all of the areas. And so that was kind of the second factor that we looked at. And we thought that the proposed additions kind of hold together. They don't split blocks. They have an association with adjacent or nearby properties that are already in the district. They may be on the edge of canyons, but strongly relate to the neighborhoods they're in, really than within the canyon. And kind of multiple other details that we're prepared to discuss.
And I did also want to note that what the board is deciding is a recommendation that gets forwarded to the state. And it would not formally require that the consultant change the scope of the hearing.
My requested to speak to as the applicant. And part of, yes, and part of the concern would be that if this goes to the state and then it comes back to the board to be designated locally, or request to be designated locally, that, you know, if it was expanded and you have a portion of the district that's designated at the state level that isn't, or a portion that would be expanded locally, but not at the state. So just wanted to try to address that.
I can answer that. If this boundary addition was designated locally and the state did not include it in their recommendation, then yes, there would have to be a amendment to the National Register nomination approved by the state. So if the existing proposed boundary is what they approve, and then this comes forward in the future for a local designation, and staff at that time suggests, and maybe perhaps the community, expanding the boundary, then it would require an amendment to the National Register nomination through the state's process.
Yes, I think that's correct. If it were to come forward through criteria E for local designation. With respect to the national designation, however, we basically followed National Register Bulletin 16B, which recommends leaving out peripheral areas that no longer retain integrity. So if you were to look at that map, all of the areas that staff is recommending to amend the boundaries for are all of peripheral areas. And, you know, while there's maybe some areas where there's a contributor, a non-contributor, a contributor, a non-contributor, in general, it was mostly non-contributors in our opinion. So we shaved off those areas and we feel it complies with the National Register Bulletin 16B, and so does state staff. And, you know, they're not recommending a change, and we're going to move forward with it on that basis. Now, it can, as I mentioned earlier, can be amended at the national level, and that's the process that we attached to our letter that was submitted on Monday. So there's a process for doing it. It's not that difficult. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? If you come back.
Oh,
No,
Barry, you're up.
Sorry. So I'm still trying to track it, so forgive me. But it sounds like your objection is not from a technical perspective. It's just you just didn't feel those ones were like a technical, like it'll jam up the process perspective. You feel that it just wasn't appropriate. So good
Well, I wouldn't say, I mean, I really think it's both. Too.
Okay.
I mean, you know, we feel that they aren't appropriate. I mean, they could be added with more analysis, but, you know, we shaved them off early in the process because we felt they were not appropriate.
Thank you.
Remember, go ahead.
Yeah, I realize we're starting to run short on time here. Before you sit down, Barry, I had a follow-up question to the follow-up question,
I'll just take this back with me.
which is there a noticing issue? If these additional properties that staff have identified outside of the boundary, does that mean that it wouldn't go to hearing at the next State Historic Resources Commission hearing?
That is also true. We would not, as the applicant, if we wanted to change the boundaries, it would have to be re-notified. Yeah, we couldn't go forward on May 3rd.
To me, that's a significant issue, so.
The court, or member Coyle, the recommendation could still be made, but the applicant, if they chose to amend the nomination before the hearing,
Right.
would have to be renoticed. However, even after, during the commission hearing, that is still a draft nomination.
Right, I get that. That doesn't change my concern about, the practical ramifications of changing a boundary at this moment. To Rami's issue, I think I'm fine with the reclassification of 4128 Ibis. Not an issue, and I'm good with the 6 reclassifications as well. I had 3 quick questions. I'll try to make them really quick. Why were canyons excluded? I didn't really have an understanding of that, Mr. Hager. I know especially with the Francis Parker area, that canyon's pretty significant.
Yeah, and this is probably a better question for Andrew Goodrich. I don't know if he can still come back online. But basically, I think staff also concurs with us, as does the state, that those areas are not appropriate for this type of district. I mean, if they're canyon lands, that might be some other type of designation, but not a historic district. So that's why the canyon areas are all cut out, even though the original subdivision map ignored canyons and put a grid over everything. But we can't do that.
Okay, I wanted to understand that issue. And secondary, the criterion B issue relative to Kate Sessions. I've done nominations before the state before, and sometimes they can be very exacting on criterion B. I was just wondering why B wasn't covered. Obviously, Kate Sessions has a great connection to this. It sort of seems like a missed opportunity to honor somebody who is so important to our community, where with some of the guys who are responsible for development and the impetus to get development here, we're telling that story in the report, but then we're not recognizing it in the criteria. I was just trying to understand if there was some direction from the state or a decision as to why not including B for Kate Sessions right now.
Yeah, this is probably also a good Andrew Goodrich question, although I think Bernie or Kelsey might be able to, because we discussed that during our meeting with them. My feeling was that because Kate Sessions would have only been identified with respect to North Florence Heights, which is less than 1/3 of the whole district, that it may not be appropriate to use B for the entire district. But I think maybe Kelsey and Bernie can chime in on that also.
Sure, I can add the 2016 Uptown Historic Context and Survey has a discussion of Kate Sessions and her significance within the community. There are a couple things. The Arnold and actually the North Florence Heights District, the survey does identify a potential association under criterion B. Staff does not ask applicants to amend their nominations, of course, to add an additional criteria. One thing in terms of the proposed district, many of the resources that we know right now are associated with Ms. Sessions are either contributors in the proposed district or individually designated. And then lastly, the Uptown survey is also looks at a multiple property listing, you may know, for Ms. Sessions. It could cover areas near Balboa Park, North Florence Heights,
in addition to a lot of the tree plantings, some of them are in this proposed district and of course elsewhere in the community.
Okay, I appreciate that. It just seems like a lost opportunity that we don't have that nailed down, and this could have been one place to do that. I'm not suggesting anybody change anything. I'm just lamenting the lack of inclusion of that.
Yeah, and I'm actually remembering now that one of the reasons why we did not include Kate Sessions is because many of the buildings that are there now were not owned by Kate Sessions. I mean, basically, when the nursery was sold, the area was developed for housing. So there's very little, I mean, there's some trees left and whatever. But the the land that was owned by Kate Sessions does not show any indications of Kate Sessions right now.
That may or may not be true, but I'll take that as the response. So thank you, I appreciate that. All right, I will yield in the interest of time to my other board members.
Other comments? Or member Farley, go ahead.
Just a quick comment, actually, just to give thanks to, I don't know if Mr. Goodrich is still on the line. He did actually answer some questions in his presentation that would have been my question. So it's always good when we have those people who can include some of that background and things like that. We'll not have to go through that. And also to Bruce Coombs on the taxing situation for the property tax thing. If you really heard it, you would get it, but being the real estate broker, that was a good one, Bruce. Thank you for that.
Can I just ask a couple of questions that were raised by speakers? I know we've discussed this before, but just for the benefit, I think it was Wesley on the phone had asked about the board's authority by virtue of the code mentioning city council making recommendations. So can staff just address that? I think we on the board are familiar with this, but want to make sure we have it in the record for this meeting.
I'm sorry, Chair, could you repeat the question?
Sure.
Multi-part.
That's
Okay, good one over here.
There was a comment raised by the public having to do with the fact that the city municipal code identifies recommendations to the state or national offices relating to state and national register nominations, and that we as a city can make recommendations through the city council. But obviously we are here as the HRB and we are the ones that are making a vote and making a recommendation, ultimately voting on a recommendation today. So I just want to make sure that that's clear to the public in terms of our authority to do that. I believe it's by virtue of our being a certified local government and kind of going down that road, but I will let someone else speak to it more eloquently.
Right, in terms of if the city as a whole were to take a position on the nomination, that would need to go through the city council. The board, in providing a recommendation on this nomination consistent with the requirements as a certified local government, is not providing a recommendation on behalf of the city, simply a recommendation from the board itself.
Okay, and then Ms. Gill had asked a question about notice being provided to residents. Can someone speak just to the notice that is provided as part of this process as compared to the notice that would be provided if we were doing this at the local level?
Yes, we mailed out 2 notices. They are courtesy notices. They are not required under the municipal code. Those 2 notices, one was to all of the parcels and the owners of the within the proposed boundary of the district as proposed by the nomination. So they got 1 notice. And then that we mailed a second notice to the 24 properties that the city was proposing could be added to the nomination, and that had a little more detail for their benefit. And again, these were courtesy notices. They weren't required by the municipal code.
And those are notices of this meeting.
Correct.
Any further questions, comments? I'll just add, and I've said it before, I always have a little bit of a struggle with the combination A, C designation, especially where we have a broad time period, 1907 to 1950, and an amalgamation of styles, designers, periods, you know, and the time period being set essentially by that's when the development was completed. In other words, that's when the area was built out. And it just feels like, you know, we're reaching a bit to try and find the uniting factor in an area, especially here where we have sort of jagged edges around the sides, excluding things even that were previously identified in a city survey. So that's just my feeling about the districts. And I'll also add, since I also typically note this, the submission from Mission Hills Heritage was submitted to the state in August of 2023. We're hearing it today on April 25th, a week in advance of a May 3rd hearing. And we have a lot of questions and we have a lot of comments and we want to participate in the process and we're asked to give a recommendation and we're given 8 days and we're kind of told there's not enough time, so you're kind of stuck with it. So I continue to think that that is a broken system and that it's not helpful to us. It doesn't allow for adequate participation for the public or for us as a board. But no one seems to care about my opinion on that, so we are where we are. Any other comments, questions, motions?
In the interest that we're running out of time, by run out of time by 1 minute, there was a slide that ARG had up, slide 8, I think. Maybe if there's a way to get that back up.
Yeah, this is Andrew Goodrich from ARG. I'm able to share that with you. So let me pull that up real quick. Okay, can you see my screen?
Is that the right slide? I guess, I don't know.
This is slide number 8 here, it looks like, the table with the 6 properties.
Okay. I'm just trying to compare that with the staff's recommendation, so.
Yeah, and just for clarification, this table did come directly from the staff report. So that's where that
Yeah, for
image
clarification,
come from.
that table informed our staff report.
Can I ask my fellow staff members a clarifying question? The property that Mr. Mungin is representing, that was not included in the staff recommendation, correct? So,
It was not.
okay, if the board would like to add that, they would have to amend the staff recommendation.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, should I try and make a motion? I'm seeing a yes, okay. All right. And if I get this wrong, folks, chime in. Recommend to the California State Office of Historic Preservation the listing of the Arnold and Choates Edition North Florence Heights Historic District with a period of significance of 1907 to 1950 at a local level of significance under national criteria A and C. And change the contributing status of the 6 properties shown in table 2, as well as 4128 Ibis Street from non-contributing to contributing, with a caveat that the proposed classifications of all contributing and non-contributing resources may not be adequately confirmed by staff due to limited property-specific information and documentation requirements for National Register nominations. I don't really like that last part, but in the interest of time, I'll go with that part of the motion.
Thank you, Board Member Coyle. We have a motion.
I will second that motion.
We have a second from Vice Chair Byers. Any further comment? All right, let's go ahead and vote. Board Member Winter. Yes. Board Member Coyle.
Aye.
Board Member Farley.
Yes.
I vote no. Board Member Byers.
Yeah.
Board Member Taylor.
Yes.
Board Member Woods.
Yes.
Board Member Cortez.
No.
All right, motion carries 6-2, is that right? I'm counting today. All right, that concludes that matter number 2. And staff, how are we doing on time in a real way? Do we need to vacate?
Over time.
I did confirm at the meeting that it's comes in after us is on the
They're right there.
All right, then we are going to, actually need to continue items 6 and 1. On advice of council, and because we are out of time in this room, we are letting everyone know that items 6 and 1, which are remaining on our agenda, will be renoticed for further a meeting in the future. Thank you all and have a good day. We will see you again on May 23rd. That's all right. May 23rd, right here, hopefully with everybody present.
Stay there.